Hello and welcome to the Finish Your Story podcast. I'm here today with a fantastic guest, Adam. Adam, please give yourself an introduction.
Hey, I'm Adam. I'm the author of Digital Extremities, which I think at the time you're listening to this probably just came out. It's a short story collection full of people who are kind of just going about their daily lives in an increasingly science fiction, cyberpunk style world. Just kind of like, not in the major cities, in the outskirts of everything most of the time. Um, I'm also a designer for Campfire, and I will occasionally illustrate maps for authors as well. So yeah, that's I think the gist of it.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
of course. Yeah. I mean, we've had you before, but it's always nice to have you again. I really appreciate it. I know, especially with Campfire and everything you do, you're very busy, especially with the launch of a book. But one reason why I wanted to bring you on today and talk about our topic of networking and focusing on how we want to run our careers as an author is because you've been in this game for quite some time. How long have you been doing like publishing books and Campfire and just all this stuff?
So it's kind of come in phases.
Mhm.
I started probably about 8 years ago when I first published a short story collection with a small um, hybrid publisher, and it was a whole thing. Uh, it was a really good experience, but it was also very difficult to navigate, and I didn't quite know what I was getting into. And I didn't really go back to it for a lot of time. And then about 4 years ago, I started up with Campfire, but we didn't really start publishing anything until later. I helped out here and there with publishing Anne Christie's book, The Never Ending End of the World. Like my contributions to that were mostly some editing and helping review some stuff here and there. But there were some other people who were most involved in actually the publishing side of that. Once we started to really put effort into our publishing platform, so like if you're publishing your book wide, you can come to Campfire and use it as a place to sell your book, and we'll any sales there you'll get it's like an 80% commission on. So we have a whole new reading app now, and I had to design basically the way that authors set up their listing and a lot of the author side stuff. And then we brought in Denise Fan to do a lot of the mobile design, which was based on my web design. And so I've been very involved in the design of all that stuff. And that's kind of been like my big entry point into all this is needing to better understand what authors need and what they're dealing with and how things could be improved through this whole process to make it as easy as possible. And we're still iterating on that.
Mhm.
Just at that time of recording, we just recently launched an update that changes how you publish stuff. We're using EPUBs now, which is what we should have been doing in the first place. Um, but yeah, we're still improving things. And just recently, because I published Digital Extremities, I've gone through and actually gone through the process, not just like testing stuff out and clicking stuff to see what happens, but actually publishing a book through all of these different platforms and services. And it's been a really cool opportunity. I'm obviously publishing a book, and that's really cool. But it's also been a really cool opportunity just for me as a designer to see how like what a typical process looks like here, and what kind of roadblocks do you run into. And of course I'm able to learn from that and pull it into Campfire and be like, oh well, I liked this thing that this other person did, or I felt like I had a roadblock right here, and so like how can we eliminate that when people come to us. And yeah, so like my perspective on this has all been very design centric, at least in the last couple years. And I'm kind of just now getting into publishing for myself. But I hope to be doing it for a little while. I've got plans for not just this book, but There's a nonfiction book that I'm working on right now, as well as a novella. Just the other day, had one of those like gym epiphanies where I had a new novella idea that I wrote down somewhere and tucked in a corner so that I would forget about it until I had time.
That's awesome. I feel like as authors and artists and creatives, and I mean, you're dealing with books and at least seeing how many people are working on their stuff and publishing it like probably
Mhm.
every day. And so I'm sure you get lots of ideas or lots of inspiration. So that is really cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's been a learning process, but I've been exposed to it a lot where like authors come to us requesting things or asking about if we have or don't have different things, and just across social media, like I've tried to curate those feeds a lot to focus on indie authors, indie publishing, and every day I see what people are talking about, what they're having issues with. I got myself into the FanFi Addict review group, and I'm on the SFF Insiders like Discord group. And those are all people who are pretty serious about all this stuff and like very open to sharing their experiences. And it's been really cool to kind of get into these communities and learn from them as well, and also be in a position to be able to help them by like writing my own reviews or giving them advice that I've learned over the last couple of years and so on.
Dang. Yeah. I mean, and this goes into our topic of just networking and everything, but one of my questions, cuz you mentioned that 8 years ago when you published your first short story collection, it didn't go exactly as planned or you weren't able to really navigate it like you thought you would be able to. What was kind of the expectation and then what was the reality of what happened in that process?
So a couple of things were happening all at the same time. Keep in mind this is like 2014 roughly.
Mhm.
So there just wasn't the ease of access and plentiful like information that we have right now about self-publishing. It was still kind of new. Like it was out there, but you had to kind of know where to go. And I had just graduated college. I'd never done any of this stuff before. I did some research and I found some places, but there just wasn't a lot of it.
Right.
Um, so that was part of the issue.
Okay.
Another part of the issue was this delusional concept that I had where I was like, oh, well, I'm like in my low 20s and I'm publishing a book. Isn't that so cool? Like the novelty of that is going to help propel me. And I'm not going to be like famous, but I'm going to have success because of that. And that was dumb. Don't think that way.
I
uh,
yeah, I think we've all been there as we start getting into our later 20s, early 30s. Our I mean, we were just talking about before, we just get older and not that we're super old or anything, but the rose tinted glasses start to fall off and reality sets in a lot harder. So,
Yeah, there was a mix of just like not enough information. The group that I was working with offered information, but I didn't know what questions to ask, and
mm,
they didn't like necessarily prompt me with the right questions. And then, kind of on top of that, it's just sort of like all of it's going to be fine because this isn't going to be like a best-selling book, but it's going to do fine. And that was not the case. It sold until all of the local family, friends, friends of friends who might be interested, kind of dried up, and then all of a sudden, nothing for years. And that was kind of a hard lesson to learn, but it was an important one. I had no social media presence at the time. I had no plans or didn't make any efforts for like a newsletter. Like there, all of those basic things that you hear about nowadays for people who are getting into publishing, working on their new books and everything. I just wasn't doing any of that, and I was, just didn't know that I needed to. So now coming into it, so many years later, um, I've been talking to people who are successfully publishing their work, tried to learn from them and incorporate some of the stuff that they're doing into what I'm doing, and playing to my strengths. Like I'm on social media now and posting like still graphics, like static things, not videos, because I don't know how to do videos. I'm not going to waste my time trying to work on it when I can make a pretty good looking graphic in about 10 minutes at most.
Yeah.
Like that is just like trying, like I said, trying to play to my strengths so that I'm not like sinking a ton of time into something and it doesn't work out, and that would suck. Whereas like if I lose 10 minutes on making a graphic, who cares? It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. So, how do you, other than learning the hard lesson of failing, which failure is good, it helps us learn, and
Yep.
it's as long as you don't devote tons and tons of money to it, it's okay. And even then, you're still learning a lot. But how do we set realistic goals so that way we're not only finding the right audience and stuff, but also we can cater our own expectations so we don't fall off and quit doing this thing that we love.
I think part of it is just through research. So, like, if I'm writing epic fantasy, let's say, which I'm not, but I think a lot of your viewers might be. Um, let's say I'm writing epic fantasy. I shouldn't necessarily be comparing myself to, you know, Game of Thrones. Like, that's ridiculous. Um, and like I might compare myself to Game of Thrones privately, but to other people, like let's compare it to similar kinds of books, like similar um, authors as well. Because like these big popular Game of Thrones style books, like Game of Thrones, Dune, what have you, these things that have just like reached such like popular culture appeal. Everybody's comparing their book to that because that's like the easy thing to do, and that's successful, and you want to be successful. But like I spoke with this was a few years ago now, but I spoke with a literary agent, and one of the things that she said was like, this was right around the time that the first Dune movie was made. She was like, everybody's going to be sending in Dune comp letters, like stories that say they are like Dune in the next couple years, and none of them are going to be any good. And like we're all just going to like eyes glaze over when we see that. It's like, no, compare your stuff to like compare yourself in recent to like recent authors, recent works, things that are more in line with your like if you're at an entry point, like this is your first, second book, or the first or second to like in that genre, like find other books like that. There are plenty of them. You just have to go look a little bit. And like, talk to those authors, see, like reach out and say, hey, I'm working on something similar. I'd love to like learn about your marketing process and what worked, what would you do again, what would you not do again. I reached out to Adrian M. Gibson when I decided to publish this short story collection because it's kind of cyberpunk. His stuff is like fungal punk, which is like cyberpunk plus mushrooms,
Hmm.
close enough.
Yeah,
So I reached out to him because his whole thing went super well. And I just asked all those questions like, what did you do? What would you do again? Like, what didn't work out? And, um, I just got a lot of really great advice from him that I was able to use moving forward into my own launch. So yeah, definitely just like talking to people, not comparing yourself to the top of the top, and learning from uh, whatever you can.
that's awesome. I mean, I feel like one big thing you mentioned is just information, and
Yep.
that's there's so much of it out there, but it can be hard to cut through all the noise.
Sure.
So, do you have any place that you like going to? Obviously, talking to authors, and
Mhm.
you have the campfire community is really important. And but do you have a place that you would suggest people start when they literally have no idea what to do?
I think Jane Friedman's blog has always been really good. She kind of digs into the details of publishing in a way that I think is pretty easy to read. There's a lot of like single author blogs and stuff like that that I think are worth looking into. I mean, like you said, we have the campfire community has a blog, and that's mostly like articles about writing and publishing and interviews with other authors. Those are a couple of places that I would start if you can actually get on a call or shoot a few questions over to somebody. People generally are happy to help out. If they have time, they will most of the time.
That's awesome. Yeah, one thing I've found, I mean, you're an example of this, is most people in the self-publishing and indie space are very kind and want to help because we've all
Mhm.
been in a spot where we had unrealistic expectations and we failed, or we were just too scared to even try. I mean, I've even met people in traditional publishing that are very kind. They just have less time because they're so
Yeah.
th- their full-time jobs are all the publishing things. And so it's a bit easier to get into the indie publishing space. So yeah, I would definitely suggest Campfire. I mean, I've used their stuff on and off for since basically the beta version. They're amazing. They're just kind people and they're very accessible. So that is really cool, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, any people who that are blogs that you have, send them my way so I can give those out to people because I mean I'm always looking to learn more. But yeah, but my last piece and last question I would like to focus on in this like setting realistic goals and kind of tempering our expectations is how can we find the right audience for our book? Kind of like you mentioned with not comparing it to Game of Thrones or Dune, but comparing it to something a bit smaller or easier. But how do we find those people to actually read our stuff? Yeah, how long do you think it would take to realistically gain an audience?
And no one knows.
Yes,
Um,
thank you. Yeah.
yeah, like I hate to burst anyone's bubble who maybe showed up looking for a concrete answer or all that, but like, so I reached out to I went to a local convention for authors recently, and one of the things that you could do there was talk to a literary agent. And so I figured, like, hey, like this person, like, they are involved in publishing every day. If anyone knows how to reach readers, it's probably them. Like, short of, a marketing person at a publisher. And so I reached out to them, and they read my piece, and they were pretty positive on it, and kind of like came to a point where it's like, so what do you need help with? And I kind of told them my plans of self-publishing, and I was like, the one thing that I'm really not 100% certain on at the moment is how do I market this thing? Like, reaching readers is so difficult. We've had trouble with that at Campfire just because like we have a whole new reading app, but people are already used to reading on Kindle. Same situation for a new author. People are already used to the authors they already like. They're taking a risk if they try something new. So like, how do you reach those people? How do you find those people? She suggested that I go viral on TikTok, um, which didn't really seem viable.
Yeah, I laugh
uh,
because the term going viral is such an executive boardroom of old white dudes thing to say. No disrespect to that person, but that's just it's a little silly that that's the answer in my
Yeah, like,
opinion.
I think she kind of understood, like, this is not a real answer, but
Right, right.
this was the best one that she had.
Yeah.
Because, like, even, publishing agents and publishers are having trouble. I mean, we saw recently, there was a court case that, released some documents about how much money goes to some books over others
Mhm.
in
Yep.
publishing, and it's the crux of it is basically like, the famous people are getting all the ad dollars, and the people who are like everybody else get little to nothing. And that's just a part of how publishing exists right now because it's so hard. Like, it's just so much less effort to convince people to buy a book from somebody they already know versus somebody that they don't. Um, and so, honestly, like, that discussion really alleviated kind of a weight off my shoulders because I was like, how do I do this right? And then all of a sudden I learned, like, oh, there is no right way. Nobody has any idea what they're doing. We're all just experimenting, trying stuff out, seeing what works. And sometimes we get lucky. And genuinely for me, like, that was just such a helpful realization because I no longer had to think about what might work and what might not. I had to put a little bit of thought into it and like not half-ass things. But you know, once you realize that it is so ephemeral and so just uncertain, I don't have to worry about it as much anymore. I'm going to like create my templates. I'm going to create stuff ahead of time, make it ready to go. And then it's just kind of going to be done. A lot of the stuff that I've been posting about Digital Extremities has been out, like it's been ready for sometimes months. Like I prepped it and I was basically done with it. And now it's just a matter of like posting it, every like a couple times a week maybe, and like now it's been out for a little bit since now that you're at whatever time you're hearing this, so maybe I've moved on to something else, or maybe I'm like posting less often. But like, it's we're all just shouting at the people, and sometimes they listen to us and sometimes they don't, and that's honestly fine. It's whatever.
Yeah. Well,
I will
yeah.
say, one thing that is very important is like when you get an opportunity to describe your book through the blurb, through tags, all of those kinds of things, like through the cover art or the title, like wherever you might communicate information to readers about your book, make sure it makes sense. Like, don't write a sci-fi book and then give it a fantasy cover, or use the wrong tags and descriptions. Like, don't have a blurb that talks about things that aren't even in the book. Like, these are all obvious, I think, but that is a very like direct thing that you can control, so that it's categorized correctly within, Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you put it. Because if it's not, then it's going to be shown to the wrong people. And like, that is just a very strict thing that you can do.
No, that is all just really solid advice. And even if you and I think, oh, they probably know this, a lot of people might not. And
Oh yeah,
that's the best thing about being able to record and repeat things and share things quickly with people, is that, they might not know, or there's just repeating something at the right time is super helpful.
yep,
And just to add on to what you said, I think persistence is the most important thing, because if you talk about your book for a couple months, publish it, then move on to the next thing, it might not catch the audience right away. But if you're talking about it for a while and you get better and better at marketing and getting that blurb out or that elevator pitch better, you're going to catch more people over time.
yeah,
And
and it gets easier over time
yes.
too, because you just get more content to work with.
Hmm.
Like, I revealed my cover, I think like 5-ish months ago,
Yeah.
and I didn't have much to show for
Yeah.
it. It was like, hey, this thing exists, and it's the first thing that I've published in so long, and nobody knows who I am, and there's like 5 people who care about it, and that's it. And as time has gone on, I announced ARCs and I was able to use it there. And I started getting reviews in from people who I reached out to for blurbs, and then started getting reviews from the ARC readers. And now at this point, like, I've got character art, and I've got maps, and I've got excerpts from the book, and I've got all of those reviews. We can talk about the different places that it's going to be listed. We can talk about, now that it's out, it's in paperback as well. So that's a whole angle I can use. Like, it just gets easier over time, but you do need to start early so that you have time to build up to your release, so that you can build excitement around it. I think the ARCs have been extremely important for me, because nobody knows who I am, but if they see I've got 20 really positive reviews for the most part, then they might take a chance on it and give it a try. All of these things kind of snowball in a really positive way, I think, a lot of the time.
Agreed. Yeah. I think, I mean, we didn't really touch on it too much, but just networking with those people and connecting with people, even if, like you said, you have 5 people who know about
Mhm.
it, which I think I was one of those 5.
Yeah, you might have been.
Even if you just have those 5 people and they like it, or they know somebody who does like it, ask them to share about it. You really have to be fearless and,
Yeah.
be confident and be fearless, but also remember, stay realistic. It is good to be like, yes, I'm gonna be the most amazing author. I'm the best author out there. But again, like you said, there's that risk of people. They could either read your book, or yeah, they could go read the new Game of Thrones or Sanderson or Rothfuss or whatever. It's like,
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
always a new Sanderson book.
Yeah, yes. There's always people's favorites. And especially, depending on your genre, just do lots of research. I think that's one of the most important parts is find communities, find research, learn as much as you can. And like you said, start early. I think that's so critical because like you said, time moves on and you have that content. You have stuff. Even if you do have just 5 people or just one person, just get it out there and practice. I think that's also really important is just practice talking about it. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I no, I think you've shared some fantastic information with us today. I really do appreciate that because we need more kindness, we need more help with authors and everything. And there's more and more authors all the time, and so it's getting harder and harder. So that's why you got to find the right audience and the right community. So, yeah. Any final thoughts or shout outs and things you want to mention before we head off here, Adam?
I will just add, since we're talking a little bit about
Yeah.
networking, reach out to people who are doing interviews, who are doing different shows like this one. I would go to other recent authors and see what they'd done for their like launch and for discussing their book and stuff. And I would reach out to those interviewers and those blogs and shows and just say like, "Hey, I'm working on this." More times than not, it got a response. Not always a positive one. Sometimes they were too busy or like scheduled too far out or whatever the case may be. Just not interested sometimes. But a good number of people were interested enough to have me on. At the time of recording, I'm currently at the start of a little bit of a live tour, which was complete accident. I didn't plan for this, but enough people responded and they wanted to do it at like within a close enough period toward the end of September and beginning of October, where I was like, I guess I'm gonna be on these like 6 live shows now. I don't know what's happening, but it happens. So let's just roll with it. So
Yeah.
yeah, like definitely just like reach out to people, look for people to reach out to, see what other people are doing. And don't be afraid to, shoot an email. It's very easy to do.
Yeah.
You just like once you have your little template, you just make sure that the name's right and make sure your blurb is good and it's there you go.
Get the name right. That's a very common
Oh
mistake.
yeah, there's one I didn't
Yep.
even have a title, and they still accepted me for some reason.
There you go. Yeah, a lot of people, and like one thing that I will say, and this is one thing I like doing, is don't care about their audience size. Just reach out because you
Yes,
never know how strong even that small community is, and
and
just treat them
stuff
like a.
like
Oh yeah, sorry, you go.
sorry,
Oh,
I
you're
was
good.
just gonna add and stuff like a YouTube show, a podcast, like all of these things are gonna stay there.
Yep.
Like even if the audience is really small right now, it's a piece of media that's going to exist, and people will find it later. Like the launch date for your book is not the final time that you talk about it. You
Hmm.
should keep talking about it, and you should have content that people can continue to uh, go to find it. So like like if it's schedules after your book release, um or if it's small right now but might grow, like don't worry about it, just do it.
Yep. And yeah, and just really treat everybody like a person. Think of it as building a relationship and not just a marketing opportunity. Because if you build that relationship now, who knows how they could help you or you could help them in the future. Adam and I planned this conversation, I think back in July. This has been
Probably, yeah.
a long time coming, just because I really like his stuff and he likes working with us. So it's like, yeah, just build friendships and people are very much willing to help. And the nicer you treat them, the more respect you give them, the better it will be for you and everybody involved. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much. You just having nearly a decade of experience gives you lots of
Eh.
experience and you've learned a lot and you have a lot of really good information. So, yeah. But
You're ignoring that multi-year period where I just did nothing.
I heard nothing. You are a published author who's working in the publishing industry, and you know what? Don't downgrade yourself for having a gap here, or a couple, or five, or whatever. Um, so no, Adam's awesome, guys. Check out his book, Digital Extremities, especially if you like kind of lower stakes, cyberpunk, a little bit of existential dread in there, some
Mhm.
real human stories, and they are very well written.
A
Yeah,
family member once asked me what it was about, and I told them, you know, all my anxieties? That.
there you go. Like I said, very realistic, very human, set in a good setting. But yes, check out Campfire. They are so cool, really great resources. They treat their authors and their community very well. They're so kind and so great. So, yeah. Adam, thank you again so much for coming on. I truly appreciate all your knowledge and experience, and you gave us some really good stuff today. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you for having me.
of course. Okay, everybody, check out our other podcast. Season 2 of the Finish Your Story podcast will be announced here pretty soon. And yeah, check out our other episodes, check out our books and all of our stuff. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.